Hi, everyone. Let me thank you first for being present at this meeting and participating in our synodal process. It's really important that you be part of this and that you help us all discern the paths we need to take forward as a church in our diocese. I've been asked to present my reflections on the church as institution and movement and association. For me as a child, when I look back to the time where I was learning to be an altar server, this was in the early 60s, I remember the church very much as an institution. For me, it was filled with rules and regulations. As an altar server, I remember having to learn all the answers in Latin that never changed from one Mass to another. I had to learn when to move the missal from one side of the altar to the other, when to kneel, when to stand, when to sit, how to incense. It was a lot of things to learn. For me as a child, it was really actually quite interesting. I was proud of my ability to master all of that. I remember in particular having to learn all the answers to the catechism. Those answers were set, they had been set down for decades, and generations of children had learnt the same answers, and I was learning the same answers to the same questions. Even if I didn't quite understand what I was saying, I knew the answers, and I would strive to get my A in catechism class. It was part of what it meant to be a Catholic. And I remember also the parish priest. He was a wonderful man. He really kind of inspired me. I really liked him as a leader of our community. But I remember the great respect with which we treated him and the way that he didn't abide any talk back. It was very much a top-down church. And I remember as a child my parents buying the Golden Book Encyclopedia. And in it there was an article on the Catholic Church. This was an encyclopedia for children, so it was a lot of illustrations. And I remember the article on the Catholic Church. The illustration was a man dressed in white, and under him a man dressed in red, and under him a man dressed in purple, and under him a man dressed in black. It was the Pope, the Cardinal, the Bishop, and the priest. And that was it. There were no women, obviously, and there were no lay people either. It was as if the church purely was made up of the members of the hierarchy. So that was my understanding of the church as a child very much. And then the Second Vatican Council came along. I remember praying for the success of the Second Vatican Council. I remember hearing about it, the fall sessions in 62, 63, 64, and 65. And for me, the first big change, obviously, coming out of that was the change in the liturgy, moving from Latin to French in my case, and the fact that there was space for creativity, for choices. I got involved as a teenager in music ministry, and we would choose hymns and we would practice them. There was a lot of space for adapting, you could say, the liturgy to our reality in a way that spoke more immediately to our style, our concerns also. And at the same time, there was a change that I noticed in the general feeling about being a Catholic. We spoke a lot more about the importance of forming a community, of growing in friendship one with another, the importance of developing relationships, actually. I didn't know it back then, but I learned afterwards that at the Second Vatican Council, one of the big changes in an important text, the text on the church, was to move from the first draft, where the church was first described in terms of its hierarchical nature, to the final version, which described the church, first of all, as the people of God. So when you move from hierarchy to people, you're moving from rules and regulation to relationships, to association. We had a priest, a parish priest up in Timmins, where I was then, who really emphasized the importance of coming together and forming a community and growing in our relationships one with another. I remember also as a teenager living what we called up north a youth encounter weekend, which was truly an adaptation of the Cursillo method for teenagers and young adults, and the importance that we had in sharing and discussing our faith one with another, in opening ourselves to others, in developing great friendships one with another, one with each other. We were invited to form small groups to continue this kind of journey. And I remember forming a small group that accompanied me from the age of 17 to 20 years old. And it was so important. Every second week we would come together for an hour and a half, and we would talk about our own faith journey, about how we had lived piety and study and action. That those small group meetings were key to my own growth as a young adult in my faith. And it was thanks to an experience of community, the church as association. You could say really that from pre-Vatican II to post-Vatican II, the emphasis moved from the church as an institution to the church as an association. And in 1995, when there was a special synod to mark the 30th anniversary, at that time, the 20th anniversary of the closing of the council, there was, the bishops decided or expressed themselves, their deep conviction, that the key to understanding all of the Second Vatican Council was the idea of communion. That in the same way that there is communion in God, Father, Son, and Spirit, we as a church are called to live communion in God, and with each other. So it's clear the shift that occurred in the church then. But at the same time, especially starting in around 1985, Pope John Paul II, started speaking more about the need for a new evangelization in countries that had been, you could say, fundamentally Christian or majority Christian, but where secularism was growing more and more, where people were moving away from any sense of belonging to the church, where Christians were becoming, in a sense, a minority. And so the Pope was inviting us to realize that we needed to learn how to go towards others, to share with them the good news of Jesus and of his message. And the expression new evangelization was really taken up by Benedict XVI, who presided a synod on that theme, established a department in Rome called the Dicastery for the New Evangelization, or the Pontifical Council for New Evangelization, and wrote a text on the topic. It was really important for Benedict that we rediscover our mission to the world. And Francis just embraced this wholeheartedly. He doesn't use the expression new evangelization much. He says at one point that all evangelization is new in the sense that it creates new life in the person who comes to know and to love Jesus. But Francis, especially because of his experience in South America, coined a number of expressions to speak about this need for the church as a whole to be concerned about the world in which it lives and to go out to that world. He speaks about a more missionary church, the need for a pastoral missionary conversion. He speaks of a church inushita. Inushita means literally in exit. I like the translation, an outward bound church, a church that is really focused on going out to others. And so this emphasis on the church as a movement is, you could say, quite new in the Catholic Church, but is actually quite old, because that's how it all started with Jesus. When Jesus came, his fundamental message was be converted and believe in the good news. And he went around spending all his time inviting people to believe in this good news and to change their lives and to embrace it, enter into a new covenant, a new type of relationship with God. He really had this very deep sense of being sent. He was on a mission. Slowly he gathered some people around him who became convinced of his message, and he invited them to join him in this movement. You could call it the kingdom movement, to go out and to proclaim that good news with him. And so this group, ragtag group, out of which grew the 12 apostles, they took up that cause. They took up that mission with him. And they formed a community. You know, they were spending so much time together that they really developed close relationships with each other and with Jesus. But the community kind of was characterized first and foremost by its mission, by its concern to go out and change the world. That's what it was all about. Even Jesus himself established some structures for this new group. You know that they had to take care of money. Judas was kind of the bookkeeper for them. He had to have some kind of authority structure, and so he named Peter to be the head of the apostles, and he entrusted special responsibilities to them. He gave them some fundamental truths to abide by, what we would later call dogma, but basically teachings that have endured to this day. He also gave them a ritual, which we call the Eucharist or the Mass, the sharing of the bread and the wine in memory of him. And he said, do this in memory of me. All these elements, you know, his teaching and the sacraments and the structure of the church, all these elements are, you could say, institutional. But they serve the mission. So the way I come to understand it is the mission is like the body going out towards others. You know, with my body, I can move towards someone, I can walk towards them, I can shake their hands, I can speak with them, I can enter into dialogue with them. My body allows me to go towards others. And so the church is called to go out towards others. And when I say the church, I'm talking about each one of us individually and as communities. Our communities are called to go out towards others to continue Jesus' mission. But the life of the body, what keeps the body alive, what allows the body to do that, are the organs that make up the body, you know, the eyes and the brain and the vocal cords, the heart and the blood system, the digestive system, the liver, the lungs. All of these organs carry the life that allows the body to go out towards others. So you could say that the community of the church is where the life abides. Coming together as a community, we become alive. The church as community, as association, is the body's organs, allowing it to go towards others. And what about the institution? Well, I like to think of the institution as the bones in the body. If I didn't have any bones, I'd just be a blob. I might be alive, but I wouldn't be able to do anything. You know, the bones give structure to the body and allow the body to move and keeps the organs functioning. A good, skeletal structure is essential. And when we start getting calcification of bones and arthritis, we know our body doesn't work very well, and we can't go towards others as easily as we like. So the institutional aspect of the church is important, but it has to remember that it is at the service of the community life and of the mission. The problem is when the institution becomes so important that we forget about community and about mission, and then the organs wither and the mission dies, and all that's left is a skeleton. And we all know how scary a skeleton is. And I think it's one of the problems. I think a lot of people outside the church, when they look at the church or talk about the church, the only thing they see is the skeleton of the church. So we need the institutional aspect. We need the organizational, structural aspect of the church. We need to know how to deal with money and how to deal with leadership issues and ministry issues, and we need how to organize our communities so that they function. All of those institutional aspects are important, but they're meant to allow the communities to flourish, and the communities flourish for one reason. It's to be able to continue Jesus' mission in the world. I like to think of three patron saints for the institutional aspect of the church and the community aspect of the church and the movement aspect of the church. And I like to think of St. Peter as the patron saint of the institutional aspect. As I said, he was named kind of the leader of the church, and he was given the task of shepherding God's people. And as Jesus said, you are the rock, and on this rock I will build my church. So he kind of represents the institutional aspect. But that institutional aspect, St. Peter needs to be at the service of the community and of the mission. I like to think of the community, the patron saint of the community, the associative dimension of the church. I like to think of St. John as that patron saint. St. John's gospel and his letters, they are so full of the importance of building community, of loving one another. It's St. John that gives us the great example of the washing of the feet, where in the community we serve one another. And he's the one also who reminds us of Jesus' command to love one another as he has loved us. And he has this beautiful sentence, he quotes this beautiful sentence of Jesus, where Jesus says, it's by the love they have for each other that people will know you are my disciples. So St. John really is the patron saint of the church as community, as association. And the patron saint of the church's mission has to be St. Paul. St. Paul, who from the very moment of his conversion, after taking time for reflecting on it and being confirmed in his mission by Peter, he went to Rome to be confirmed in that mission, then set out and didn't stop for the rest of his life, going from one place to another, throughout the Mediterranean, into from Palestine into Syria, into what is now Turkey, and crossing over into Europe, into Greece, and eventually to Rome. This man couldn't stand still. He really was the bearer of the good news, and he brought Jesus' mission to places that Jesus had never visited, obviously, because Jesus never stepped a foot outside of Palestine. So really, Paul reminds us of the urgency of the mission and how we are called to go out. So that's how I understand, the relationship between the three. And if before the council, we were really focused on the church as institution, and after the council, we focused on the church as an association, now the call is set before us. Because of the world in which we live, because of the growing secularization which is characteristic of our society, the call before us is to embrace once again the mission that Jesus himself came to fulfill, and to take up his mission, to re-become this church that has a movement, to become an outward bound church. So those are some thoughts, and I hope they're helpful to you, and that they enrich your discussion as you move forward in this workshop. God bless.